Good morning. What's good about it? Well, I'm in a lovely, peaceful little spot in England, in Hertfordshire, in fact. So, I'm not in the Holy Land, for instance. Palestine, Israel. Civil War. Well, we had ours in Britain, England, rather, back in the, whenever it was, Cromwell, 1500, late turn of the 1600s or something, over 400 years ago, 500 years, whatever it is, something like that. Well, one's spirit goes out to any people who suffer, quite frankly, when, for me anyway, one has one's own material comfort, which I certainly do. I'm not luxurious here at all, but I have everything that I need, to be relatively civilized. Fresh, clean running water, power, gas, washing, everything, food, obviously, cooking and so on, and a lovely fridge, I'm afraid. I like my fridge. It means I can have fridge freezer, I can have frozen vegetables and stuff, and I've got good food on tap. It's not an aircraft hangar one, the way the Americans have, but anyway. So all of that, lucky old me, and then of course one is in essentially a settled country. But what a surprise now, so focusing on the Middle East obviously, in the Holy Land, with its latest flare up, I don't think that's really a strong enough word, but potential for actual civil war. So my fingers found a very good documentary about the sort of historical background to the current situation. And what a surprise if both the British and the French basically virtually engineered the current situation. I mean, just to gallop through this film, incidentally, I have a friend in Spain. It's not available in Spain for some reason. But some of the salient points, which I picked up on through that film and elsewhere, about the historical background to this, the Israelis, the Palestinians, Arabs and so on, is that it was the jolly old British and French, and there was Zionism kicking off. So if we go back to about 1880, and then scroll on to 1917, which was the Balfour Declaration. It wasn't a treaty or anything, it was just sort of an intent to, I think, basically support Jews by the British, but they were carving the place up anyway into A and B, and then the British wanted the English much more so, with Churchill wandering around and Lloyd George and all of that lot, all in proper toppers, black top hats, wing collars and all of that. Edwardian still, I think then, or perhaps he'd gone by then, but anyway. So I'm no historical expert or anything, but essentially it would seem that there were something like 700,000 Palestinians, Arabs, in that region, Palestine, the whole, that sort of, including what's now the Gaza Strip and the West Bank and so on, and then there was Jordan, and that was all sort of lumped in. And then Iraq, and lo and behold, guess who wanted to get their hands on the Iraqi oil? My lot, the English. And then they wanted a port out, so Haifa had to be carved off, so they could get there. The oil they got at a very good price. as it were, out of the ground in Iraq with massive oil resources, etc., etc. And on it went, and there was Faisal, the Arab leader, and he was conned, and then there was another Arab leader, and the whole thing was a stitch-up by the British, quite frankly, and the French. Something, the figure I think was 7,000-8,000 only Jews were living there sort of prior to the major influx. And then, of course, the situation now is, I think the figure's about 9 million population Israelis, of whom 70% are in Israel. I don't know if this includes Gaza and the West Bank. Anyway, but whatever the figures are, there are now some 7 million Jewish Israelis and some millions of Arab Palestinian Israelis. So it is the Jews, the Israelites, if you like, who are the occupying power. And then the other huge thing for me, I'm a Christian, is this question of God, quite frankly. That's the real heart of the matter, as far as I'm concerned. And this was a Haredi, ultra-Orthodox Jewish rabbi, an older man, very sensible sort of type, but dressed with the funny hats and the curls and the gefilim and all the rest of it, saying that God predestined for his chosen people, the Israelites, the Jews, the diaspora of AD 70-ish, when the Romans sacked Jerusalem, to the last stone. So going back those 2,000 years, and then the Jewish peoples throughout the whole world now, of course, which again is all part of God's plan, and then along they came, and these ultra-Orthodox, it's not just this one rabbi, I mean, it is, I think, generally held amongst the ultra-Orthodox community in Stamford Hill, North London in particular, is that, in fact, Jews should not return to the Holy Land, for me, Palestine, Israel, whatever you want to call it, until Christ comes again. For us, as Christians, the second coming. In fact, the Jews are sort of still waiting for the first coming, so that's a whole other story. Well, no wonder there's this conflict, and then throughout the whole world there have been massive demonstrations by, now the Palestinians have been exiled all around the world, not just in the sort of Arab states, Jordan and Lebanon and so on, Egypt possibly quite a lot, but all over the show, London, Paris, Madrid, Australia, everywhere. And then that is raising this question of anti-Semitism. I pray this, okay, this is when Simeon found Christ at the temple. Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace, for mine eyes hath seen thy salvation, which you have prepared in the sight of all people, a light for revelation to the Gentiles, and for the glory of thy people Israel. So that's my evening prayer. Incorporated into my evening prayer. Well, so, Christ was a Jew. To recognize that the current set of Israelis living in that land are the occupying power, the terrorists, in fact, and the Palestinians are the freedom fighters, is not anti-Semitic. It's a plain recognition of the actual position. The State of Israel was declared in 1948 only, so that's 70 years, barely 70 years plus. It's been in existence. And their whole policy, again listening to another film, right from the early 1920s, was to squeeze the Palestinians out by laws, by behaviours, by all sorts. And then what's kicked off this last flare is not the right flare-up, it's a much bigger thing than a flare-up. Eruption, quite frankly, of underlying feelings in people being occupied and downtrodden and made into second-class citizens by the Israelis, was trying to annex yet another bit of land there, I think in Jerusalem or nearby, by the Israelis through the law. They are the occupying power. That is not an anti-Semitic statement. It is a bare statement of the truth. Civil war is dreadful. You don't know what's what, do you? Who's your neighbour? Who's your friend? What will happen next? Especially with these young people. I mean, I've been appalled to see these young Israelis with great Star of David flags running around, trashing Arab property, and then of course they're the other way around as well. It's awful. Leading nowhere, just storing up more sort of reasons to be. I can feel this hatred actually, somehow. Having watched some of these films, it's awful. Anyway, what can I, myself, do about it? Well, I believe I've got a fairly good, clear overview of what is going on and why. And then ultimately, again, as a Christian, I'm completely clear. There will be a second coming of Christ, the second coming of Christ, and then God will sort us out, and then there'll be peace, this 1,000 years of peace. Whether that happens in our lifetimes or not is another matter, but I'm now living in this world now, here and now today, Monday the 17th of May 2021, and we'll see what happens next, quite frankly. But God is the boss, and until you recognize that, then you will never see clearly. You have to put God first. Amen. But then, of course, the two commandments. So love God, but then love your neighbor as yourself. And who is my neighbor? Well, in this context, I've lived in Mill Hill, for heaven's sake. So there's Edgware, Golders Green, amongst Jewish people, all around me. Very talented, gifted, highly intelligent, capable people. Thank you very much. Some of my best friends are actually Jews, so there. Now, love God, that's the point. Put God first, and then you'll see clearly. Amen.